Everybody like and subscribe, praise the bell icon. Story number 1.
Valentine's Day, 2018. Jenna was a 24-year-old waitress living in a small town in upstate New York. She'd just gotten out of a toxic 2-year relationship and had decided to spend the romantic holiday alone, soaking in a bath and binge-watching horror movies with a glass of wine. Her friends urged her to go out to meet someone new, but she wasn't in the mood. The last thing she wanted was another guy pretending to be charming just to manipulate her like the last one had. That night, around 9 p.m., her phone buzzed. An unknown number sent a text that simply said, "Happy Valentine's Day, beautiful." She stared at it for a moment, unsure if it was some cruel prank or maybe a friend trying to be funny. She didn't reply. 10 minutes later, another message came in. "Still like red roses? I left some at your door." Jenna's heart skipped. She glanced toward the hallway leading to her front door. She lived in a third-floor apartment, and no one could get to her door without being buzzed in. Quietly, she got up and approached the door, looking through the peephole. Nothing. She slowly opened it, and there they were. A fresh bouquet of red roses lying neatly on her welcome mat, wrapped in white paper. No note, no card, nothing. She grabbed the flowers and looked down the hallway, but there was no one. Just silence. She walked back inside, locking the door behind her. It was strange, but maybe someone she knew had gotten access to the building. A neighbor, maybe. Her stomach was uneasy, but she tried to shake it off. Another message came in at 10:03 p.m. "The bathwater's cold now, huh?" She dropped the phone. Her chest tightened. She hadn't told anyone she was taking a bath. Her blinds had been closed. She ran to the bathroom and checked the window. It was cracked open just enough for someone to peek in from the fire escape. Her hands trembled as she slammed it shut and locked it. Calling the police crossed her mind. But what would she say? Someone left flowers and sent a few creepy messages? There was no threat, just dread. Instead, she called her friend Mia, begging her to come stay the night. Mia lived 20 minutes away but promised she was on her way. While waiting, Jenna sat in her living room with the lights on, phone in hand. No more messages, no sounds, just the soft hum of the heater and her own pulse thudding in her ears. At 10:47 p.m., a knock at the door. Jenna jumped up. She peeked through the peephole. Mia. She exhaled and opened the door. Only it wasn't Mia. It was a man wearing a hoodie, his face partially hidden. The smile on his face was wide and unnatural. He didn't say a word, just stared at her. Jenna slammed the door shut, locked it, and backed away, dialing 911 with shaking hands. The dispatcher stayed on the line with her as the man knocked again. Not hard, not aggressive, just a gentle, polite knock. Then another and another, like a rhythm, like a twisted Valentine's Day song. By the time police arrived, the hallway was empty. No man, no trace, except one thing. They found a single red rose taped to her door. And behind the rose, tucked under the tape, was a photograph. A zoomed-in picture taken from outside her bathroom window. It was her in the bath, eyes closed, completely unaware. The man was never caught. Every Valentine's Day since, no matter where she moves, Jenna gets a red rose left at her door. No note, no message, just the rose, and the knowledge that someone out there still loves her.
Story number 2.
Valentine's Day, 2015. Logan, a junior at a college in Oregon, was working the late shift at a small campus coffee shop. It was bitter cold outside, snow dusting the sidewalks, and most students had either gone home for the weekend or were out at romantic dinners. The place was dead quiet, just Logan and his coworker Hannah, passing the time behind the counter. They were closing in 15 minutes when someone walked in. He was tall, wearing a black coat that was soaked at the bottom as if he'd been walking for miles. His face was pale, eyes glassy, lips slightly cracked. He didn't say anything at first, just looked around the empty shop before ordering a black coffee. No sugar, no milk. His voice was low, so low Logan almost didn't hear it. When he paid, his hand brushed Logan's and it felt ice cold. He didn't blink, didn't smile. Logan tried to shrug it off, handed him the drink, and the man sat at the far end of the cafe, near the window, facing out into the snowy night. He didn't touch his coffee, just sat there, staring. They closed the register and started cleaning up. Hannah kept glancing toward the man. "He hasn't moved," she whispered. "Hasn't even blinked." When closing time hit, Logan politely told the man they were shutting down. The man stood, nodded slowly, and without a word walked out, leaving the full cup of coffee behind. Logan locked the door and turned the sign to closed. As he turned back toward the counter, he noticed something written on the napkin under the cup. At first, it looked like smeared ink. Then he saw the words, "Don't let her walk alone." He called out for Hannah, but she'd already gone into the back to grab her coat. Logan ran to her, napkin in hand, and showed her. "What the hell is this?" he asked, heart pounding. She looked pale. "He said something weird to me when I was in the back," she whispered. "He came back there and said, 'It's a shame. Red always looks better in snow.' Then he just walked away." They ran to the front door, looked out into the snow-covered street. The man was standing on the opposite side of the road now, staring straight at them. No expression, just staring. Logan locked the door tighter. The man turned and slowly walked down the sidewalk, disappearing into the dark. After convincing Hannah not to walk home, they both left together, sticking to the well-lit paths. Logan kept looking behind them the whole way, but the man never reappeared. The next morning, campus police were swarming the east side of campus. A girl had been found near the forested path that led to the dorms, a route many students use when cutting through campus late at night. Her body was discovered half buried in the snow. She had been stabbed, and her blood had pooled and frozen into the earth. What made it worse was the note found tucked in her coat pocket. It said she walked alone. To this day, neither Logan nor Hannah ever saw the man again. But every Valentine's Day since, Logan receives a black envelope under his dorm door. Inside, always the same message written in the same shaky handwriting. "Don't forget who listened."
Story number 3.
Valentine's Day, 2009. Rachel was a senior in high school, living in a small rural town where nothing ever really happened. Everyone knew everyone, and the biggest events were football games or the annual Valentine's Day dance at the community center. That year, Rachel didn't have a date. She wasn't heartbroken about it. She just wasn't interested in anyone. Still, her best friend Emma convinced her to go, saying it would be fun, even without a date. The night was cold and windy, but the community center was packed, warm, and glowing with red and pink lights. Heart-shaped balloons floated near the ceiling, and a DJ played cheesy love songs over and over. It was all cliche and awkward, but Rachel was actually having fun, laughing with her friends, dancing, drinking too much cheap fruit punch. Then, near the end of the night, Rachel found a note in her jacket pocket. She didn't remember putting it there. It was folded into a perfect heart and written in red ink. It said, "I've been waiting. You were always meant to be mine. Meet me in the old gym, alone." Her first thought was that it was a joke, probably some kid trying to mess with her. But a tiny part of her was curious. The old gym hadn't been used in years. It was shut down after a student fell from the bleachers during a basketball game and cracked his skull open. Some said it was haunted, but most people just avoided it because it was creepy and half collapsed. Still, her curiosity got the better of her. She slipped out of the dance, not telling anyone, and made her way across the snowy field to the old gym. The building stood like a shadow against the night sky, broken windows, rusted doors, the air thick with silence. She pushed one of the side doors open, and it groaned like something dying. Inside, it was freezing. Moonlight filtered in through holes in the roof. The wooden floor was cracked, parts of it rotting away. She took a few careful steps in. "Hello?" she called out. No answer. She turned to leave, but stopped when she saw something out of the corner of her eye. A figure, standing in the far corner of the gym, tall, still, watching her. "Who's there?" she asked, her voice shaking now. The figure didn't move, but she heard something, a faint dragging sound like something heavy being pulled across the floor. She backed up, heart pounding, and suddenly the lights in the gym flickered on for a split second, long enough for her to see the figure clearly. It was a man, but not a student. He was older. His face was pale and bloated like it had been underwater. His eyes were wide open, bloodshot and lifeless, and in one hand he held a box of chocolates, old, soggy, and dripping something dark. The lights snapped off again. Rachel screamed and bolted out of the gym, slipping on the icy stairs outside. She didn't stop running until she was back at the community center, breathless and hysterical. Her friends thought she was drunk or playing a prank. No one believed her. The next morning, when the school janitor unlocked the old gym to check on a reported break-in, he found the rotten remains of a heart-shaped chocolate box and a note pinned to the wall with a rusted nail. It said, "She came, but she didn't stay." There was no record of who the man might have been, no fingerprints, no evidence of anyone else in the building. But from that year on, every Valentine's Day, someone breaks into the old gym and leaves a box of chocolates on the floor. No one sees them do it. No cameras catch it. And every note says the same thing. Still waiting.
Story number 4.
Valentine's Day, 2022. Elise, a 29-year-old freelance graphic designer, had just moved into a new apartment complex in Milwaukee. She'd gotten out of a messy breakup 2 months earlier. And while she was still recovering, she decided she'd treat herself to a peaceful night in. No dates, no drama, just wine, takeout, and a dumb horror movie marathon. Around 7:30 p.m., she heard a knock on the door. She wasn't expecting anyone. When she checked the peephole, no one was there. Figuring it was kids messing around, she rolled her eyes and went back to her couch. 10 minutes later, another knock. This time, it was slower, more deliberate. Again, no one when she checked. But this time, there was a small red envelope on the floor outside her door. No name, no return address, just a heart sticker sealing it shut. Inside was a single card, black with deep red lettering that read, "Someone's thinking of you." No signature. Elise thought maybe it was from her ex trying to stir something up again. She ripped it in half and tossed it out. Later that night, while brushing her teeth, she caught something in the mirror, a shape, just for a second, in the hallway behind her. She spun around. Nothing. She told herself it was just her imagination. New place, creepy holiday, bad lighting. At 10:12 p.m., another knock. This time, harder. When she opened the door, there was another envelope. This one had her name on it, her full name. No one in the building even knew her yet. Inside was another card. "You look lovely tonight, especially when you're brushing your teeth." Her blood ran cold. She checked every lock in the apartment, pulled the curtains tight, and grabbed the kitchen knife. She dialed the non-emergency line for the local police and explained the situation. They said they'd send someone to patrol the area, but unless there was a threat or break-in, there wasn't much they could do. At 12:04 a.m., she heard a soft thump outside her bedroom window. She lived on the 3rd floor. She froze, crept to the window, and carefully peeked through a sliver in the blinds. There was a man standing on her small balcony, staring straight at her, pale, smiling, holding a card in one hand and something in the other, something dark, something dripping. She screamed and ran to the bathroom, locking herself inside while calling 911. By the time police arrived, the man was gone. But on the balcony, they found the card he'd left behind. It said, "Happy Valentine's Day. You'll always be mine, one way or another." Next to it was a box. Inside was a heart, not chocolate, flesh, real. They never caught the man. Over the next 3 months, Elise moved across the country, changed her name, went fully off-grid. But every Valentine's Day since, a black envelope shows up at her new address. No stamp, no return, just waiting for her on the doorstep. Always with the same line, "I never stop thinking of you."
Story number 5.
Valentine's Day, 2013. Caleb was a night shift security guard at Roseview Hospital, a half-abandoned facility with most of its wings shut down due to budget cuts. Only the ER and one floor were still in operation. The rest of the hospital sat in silence, dark and decaying. Caleb had grown used to the eerie atmosphere, the creaks, the flickering lights, the occasional sound of something falling in an empty hallway. But he wasn't superstitious, just bored. That night, just past midnight, he was doing his rounds when he noticed something strange on the surveillance monitors. A woman in a red dress walking through the abandoned East Wing, the part of the hospital that had been shut down for over a year. No patients, no staff, no power in that section at all. He squinted. The cameras in that area were grainy and old, but the image was clear enough to see the woman was barefoot, pale, moving slowly, almost like she was gliding. She turned a corner and disappeared from view. Caleb radioed upstairs to the ER nurses to see if anyone had wandered off, but all patients were accounted for. He figured someone broke in, a squatter maybe, so he grabbed his flashlight and headed to the East Wing. The second he crossed through the double doors, everything felt wrong. The air was thick, cold, and it was dead quiet. His boots echoed on the cracked linoleum as he swept his flashlight across peeling walls and empty rooms. He made it halfway down the hall before stopping. There were rose petals scattered on the floor leading toward room 237. It made no sense. That wing hadn't had power or visitors in over a year. No one even cleaned it anymore. And yet the petals looked fresh, wet. He approached the door slowly. His radio crackled with static. Inside room 237, the bed had been made, perfectly. On the pillow sat a small heart-shaped box of chocolates, untouched, with a note next to it. The note read, "You're late. I waited." Suddenly, behind him, he heard soft humming. A woman's voice, familiar, sweet, a tune he couldn't place but felt like he'd heard in a dream or a nightmare. He turned quickly, flashlight shaking, but no one was there. He backed away fast and turned to leave the room. Only now the hallway wasn't empty. The woman in the red dress stood at the end, her hair long and soaked, her face pale, mouth slightly open, her eyes black like they'd been burned out. She lifted her hand and pointed at Caleb, then vanished. Not walked, vanished, gone. He ran. By the time backup arrived, room 237 was empty. The bed was covered in mold. The chocolate box? Rotted. The note? Gone. When Caleb reviewed the footage from earlier, the woman in the red dress was still there, but something else chilled him. As she walked through the hallway, every light above her flickered on, despite the entire wing having no power. Later that night, he looked up the hospital archives and discovered room 237 used to be a psychiatric recovery room. In 1987, a woman named Teresa Lane was found dead there on Valentine's Day after hanging herself with IV tubing. She had been admitted weeks earlier for repeated attempts to harm herself after her fiancé vanished without a trace before their wedding. Her last note had only 3 words, "You promised me." Since then, every few years on Valentine's Day, security guards reported seeing her, but most didn't stick around after. Caleb put in his resignation the next morning, but every February 14th since, he gets an anonymous card in the mail. Always the same handwriting. Always the same message.
Story number 6.
Valentine's Day, 2017. Brielle was a senior in college, renting an old townhouse with 2 roommates just outside of Savannah, Georgia. The place was cheap, drafty, and full of creaks, but it had character. Her roommates were out on dates that night, and Brielle had the house to herself, something she actually looked forward to. She'd planned a solo night in with a bottle of wine and an old romance novel she'd been meaning to read. Around 8:15 p.m., she received a phone call from a number she didn't recognize. She let it ring out. A few seconds later, it called again, then a 3rd time. On the 4th ring, she answered. There was silence, then breathing, slow, calm, close. "Hello," she said. "Who is this?" A whisper responded, "I like the red light in your room." She froze. She had a small red lamp by her bed that she often used in the evenings. It gave off a soft, warm glow, but the window in her room faced the backyard. There was no way to see the lamp from the street. She hung up, heart racing, and rushed to her window. She pulled back the curtain and saw nothing, just her quiet yard, an old tree, and a rusted swing set the previous owner had left behind. Everything looked normal. Trying to calm herself down, she turned off the lamp and locked her bedroom door. She even laughed a little, thinking maybe it was some Valentine's prank. Kids. Trolls. At 9:06 p.m., a text came through. "You looked better with the light on." She stared at it, her hands shaking. She called her roommates. Both were still out, nowhere nearby. She dialed 911, explaining what was happening. The dispatcher was calm, told her to stay inside, and that a unit would swing by to check the area. While waiting, she sat on the living room couch, every light in the house turned on. She didn't even realize she had her fists clenched until she noticed blood under her fingernails from digging into her own skin. Then came another knock. Not on the front door, on the glass of the sliding back door that led to the yard. She turned her head slowly. A man was standing just beyond the glass, completely still, face pressed slightly to the window, his head tilted, his hand raised, holding something. It was her red bedroom lamp. She couldn't move, couldn't scream, could barely breathe. Then, just as suddenly, he turned and walked away into the dark yard. By the time police arrived, he was gone. They found footprints in the muddy grass circling the house. They found the lamp placed neatly in the center of the backyard, still warm. No fingerprints, no sign of forced entry. But upstairs in her closet, officers found something else, an old Valentine's Day card taped to the inside wall. It was dated February 14, 1983, addressed to someone named M. The message inside was written in faded red ink. "If I can't have you in life, I'll keep you in the dark forever." The handwriting matched the one from the texts on Brielle's phone. But here's the thing. No one had ever lived in that house named M. The property had changed hands multiple times over the years, and there was no record of anyone by that name ever owning or renting it. The police said maybe someone left the card there years ago, and it was just coincidence. Brielle didn't care. She moved out that same week, but every Valentine's Day, no matter where she lives, a red lamp appears somewhere nearby. On her porch, in her car, once even inside her locked apartment. No notes, no threats, just the red light. Always warm, always watching.
Story number 7.
Valentine's Day, 2014. Sarah had just started working as a nurse at St. Agnes Hospital in a small town in northern Michigan. The hospital had been there for decades, old, with a creepy, outdated charm. It was an isolated place in the winter, the roads around it often blanketed with heavy snow, leaving the building feeling like it was its own world. Sarah was on the late shift that night, one of the few staff members working the emergency ward. The patients were few and far between, so she had a lot of time to kill. Around 10:30 p.m., the door to the ER opened, and a man in his mid-30s, covered in snow and with bloodshot eyes, staggered in. He looked dazed and weak, but he didn't appear to be in any immediate danger. "I need help," he whispered, barely audible. "She's still out there. She's still coming for me." Sarah was confused. She asked if he'd been in an accident, but he didn't respond to her questions directly. His eyes darted around the room, his hands shaking. "I can't stay here," he murmured. "She'll find me. She always does." His words sent a chill down Sarah's spine, but she escorted him to an examination room and tried to get him settled. She had him sit down on the bed, checking his vitals, but he wasn't cooperating. His eyes kept shifting toward the hallway, and he kept muttering under his breath about someone following him. Suddenly, the lights flickered. "She's here," the man said with urgency, his voice suddenly sharp and panicked. Before Sarah could respond, the door to the examination room slammed open, but there was no one there. The man stood up, backing into the corner, shaking uncontrollably. His eyes widened as he stared at something invisible in the hallway. "She's coming. She's always here. Always," he whispered, tears welling in his eyes. Sarah tried to calm him down, but before she could move, the man lunged toward the door as if something were chasing him. In a burst of fear-driven adrenaline, he sprinted down the hall, yelling about her finding him, begging for someone to help. The hospital was eerily quiet, only the sound of his footsteps echoing off the cold tiles. Sarah chased after him, calling for help, but when she reached the ER waiting room, he was gone. The security footage later showed the man running through the halls, looking over his shoulder as though something was just behind him, but there was nothing visible. At one point, he stopped abruptly, staring into an empty hallway, and then collapsed onto the floor. When the staff finally reached him, there was nothing more to be done. The man was dead. No one knew how or why he died. There were no signs of physical trauma. But what was even more disturbing was the blood on the floor. It wasn't his. It was fresh, dripping from the ceiling above him. The next morning, the hospital staff tried to make sense of the situation, but it was as though the man had never existed. No one knew his name. No one knew how he had even gotten there. There were no records of him being admitted. And when Sarah checked the security footage again, the part of the tape where the man collapsed had been mysteriously wiped. Years later, Sarah would be working the same shift again, on another Valentine's Day, when she saw the same thing happen. The door opened. A man in his mid-30s walked in, covered in snow, with bloodshot eyes. And once again he whispered, "She's still out there. She's still coming for me." Sarah tried to call for help, but when she reached the waiting room, the man was gone. There was no trace of him. And every Valentine's Day since, Sarah still sees him. He shows up at the hospital in the same disoriented state, mumbling the same words. But this time, She's sure of it. She's the one he's running from. The woman, the one who's been chasing him all these years, has been after her this whole time. She can feel her cold presence just outside the door, because now she knows the truth. She's been the one he was warning about all along.